Every time I get a new haul of moulds, I get them on a piece of paper and put them in the mixing cup of fate. Then we'll stir them up and pour one out to find out what our next project will be. Welcome to our first ever episode of
Project Mystery Mould!
To mark this occasion, I have two very special helpers here who are going to help me choose our next mystery project. Before we get started, what are you hoping we draw out?
The fox.
The fox?
I am hoping to draw out the dragon.
The dragon? Alright, well, let's see what we get.
Ready, steady.
We got the fox! Because it's our first ever episode, we are going to do two projects. So, let's draw again.
We got the lizard.
So for Mr. Fox, I'm thinking white fox, kind of Arctic theme. And for that, we're going to be using some of these stones. It's like imitation quartz type stone. I'm thinking this little flower. I'm thinking some gold gems for eyes. And definitely throw in some gold flakes. And for Mr. Lizard, I am thinking we're going purple with amethyst. And some purple sand and purple gems for the eyes. But let's get started. Alrighty, we have here Mr. Lizard, and the first step for both of these guys actually is to UV resin their eyes in place and any other things we want in place before we do the actual big deep pour. So here I am just using my trusty tweezers to place the gems where I want them, and then using the UV light to cure that resin on the spot. Then going in with some of those amethyst stones, and then the same process. So we're putting down a drop of UV resin, placing our stones where we want them, another drop of UV resin on top, and then curing the crap out of it with the UV torch. Making sure that it is fully set both sides as well, so top and bottom, just to make sure that all of the resin in between those stones is all nice and cured before we pour the actual other resin on top. And now it's the fox's turn for the same sort of UV treatment. Here I'm starting with the fox's ears. So I'm putting a drop of resin into the ear and then taking some gold leaf, which is just to the side of me off camera. You can't quite see it. And then UV resining that in place because I want his little ears to have like little gold tips. So once I'm happy with the placement of the gold leaf, I UV light both sides or all facets, as many as I possibly can, with that UV torch, just again to make sure that everything is nice and set before we do the bigger pour. Just repeating the same process for his nose. So drop of UV resin, a little bit of gold leaf, another drop of UV resin to hold it in place, and then using our light to cure it on the spot there so it's nice and set. And the final detail that we are going to UV resin on this little fox is that beautiful flower. So I've put a drop of UV on the chest of the fox and then placed the flower in there as well and just held it down while I cured it with the light. And then again, give everything a once over with that light again one more time. And we are ready to begin filling little fox up with those beautiful stones. So I had to pick the smaller stones of the bunch because obviously it's a little small mold, and place them very carefully inside. But the goal was to essentially fill as much of the fox up with these stones as possible before we actually pour the resin. I decided to use some pearl alcohol ink just to slightly tint the resin, and I poured that resin so slowly just to make sure that I could eliminate as many bubbles as possible to start with. However, I had to tap tap so much just to release the bubbles that I knew would be trapped in between the rocks, in all of the bits and pieces, the folds, the crevices of the mold itself. So you can see me here tapping. I tapped honestly for a good 10-15 minutes. This is just fast forwarded. There was a lot of bubbles that accumulated there where the flower was, so you'll see me start to kind of work them out and sort of rub the silicone stirring stick against it and just sort of bring those bubbles up to the surface. So hopefully we will have minimal bubbles in our actual finished piece once it is cured. Then it was Mr. Lizard's turn, so I took some of that resin, mixed in our purple sand, and then gently and carefully poured it into the mold. Last step was to give him also a few little taps, a little bit of a torch, and set them off to the side to cure for the next 2 to 3 days. And now it's time for the reveal. Let's begin with the fox. Here he is. Very, very cute. Okay, let's unpack the fur texture in the mold itself. Here's the mold. And when I'm looking at the mold, even just, from the outside, you can see that there is lots of texture involved. And when you're looking at it from the inside, you can see even more kind of texture. It's not a smooth mold, which is not going to give us a shiny finish. But unfortunately for us, what that means is that there is very limited visibility to inside the actual piece, which means that we don't get to see the stones in there. And the only bits we do get to kind of see are the gold flakes in the ears and the nose, and also kind of the gold gems. They're there. You can definitely see them. They're just not as shiny. But these parts were a little bit smoother. They were less textured than the rest of the fox itself. So what I went and did was, just to see what the difference is, I did a little tiny flood coat, I suppose, just on here, just to see if I could make it a little bit more see-through, particularly for this part here where we wanted to see the flower, right? And it kind of worked. It's not too bad. I did a little bit of a test on the back too, just on his little tail here, and you can definitely see the difference there. So this bit here is a lot more see-through. Obviously it's less textured because it's glazed over with a layer of UV resin. And so you can see, and the camera's not doing it justice, but you can see that beautiful pearlescent resin that we tinted in there when we did the pour. And it's very shiny and sparkly and pearl-like. It's beautiful. The stones give it some weight, which is nice. But unfortunately, we can't really see too much of what is happening in there. So you can see quite a few kind of almost micro bubbles. They're not that small, but they're not big either. So you can see some bubbles in there. So it doesn't matter how much tapping we did, we still got a few little air bubbles, but I shudder to think how many more we would have got if I didn't spend that 15 minutes tapping away at the piece once it was in the mold. It's not too bad. Like it's because the fur is so textured, you can't obviously see the bubbles so clearly. But I learned a good trick that if you fill your mold up with water before you do any kind of pouring with resin, it actually gives you an idea where the bubbles are going to start to form. And usually it's going to be in the spots where there's little kind of details and little crevices and stuff on the inside of the mold that you'll need to work out. But if you fill it with water, you get to see whereabouts you need to focus your energy on. And moving on to Mr. Purple Lizard. Here he is. This guy, when I pulled him out of the mold, you really couldn't see much of anything, really. So the mold also is quite detailed and textured. And again, what that means is that the surface of our piece ends up being textured as well, which means that it's not clear or glass coated. So what I did for this guy was I essentially did a massive flood coat. And with that, it lost a bit of detail. So it lost some of the little scales and stuff that were on there on his back. But in return, I gained visibility to be able to see the actual amethyst stones in here, which is far more important to me than the detail. I would rather a smooth glass-like finish and be able to see the beautiful stuff going on inside the piece rather than have this detail where it's kind of really murky on the inside and it just looks like a purple blob. Underneath, this is our sand, purple sand, which didn't come out too bad. I think if I was to do this piece again, I would be using possibly a lighter color instead of purple, so that we can again get a little bit more contrast and the stones will stand out a little bit more. But I think he turned out okay. There was a fair little bit of cleaning that we had to do, had to sort of trim off some edges. The only thing that kind of bothers me about this piece is you can't really see the gems in the eyes. They kind of just get lost. And I don't know if it's the color of the gem. I don't know if it's because the mold is textured, but even after a glass coat, you can't really see the gem. It probably doesn't help that I put the gem in on the side of the eye. I missed the mark, but anyway. I really thought that I would have more trouble at the beginning UV resining the little detail bits in, but they did not give me any trouble at all. Everything stuck as it should have. All of the stones, the gems, the flower even did really well. It did not move. So that's a big tick for that process. The deep pour resin I used it didn't flash cure, which is a history for me, so I'm glad that didn't happen. The pearl alcohol ink that we added in there gave it a nice little tint to it. The only thing that I guess was disappointing was that you can't see inside the little fox because of the texture. If you have stuck around this far, thank you so much for experimenting with me, and I will see you in the next one. Mystery Mould, where I let the mixing cup of fate decide what I. Today we are shooting our first ever episode of
The mixing cup of doom.
Today we are shooting. Welcome to the first episode of
Project Mystery Mould.
No! Oh my gosh!
I'm going to pull out the big dragon for a change.
So stupid! I should just be normal!
That was bad. That was bad. That's not it. We got these. We got these. That's not it. We got these.